Well, Premier and Treasurer Lara Giddings promised deep budget cuts, and that's what she's handed down today. Her first budget targets savings of a massive $1.4 billion over 4 years. And even with such major cuts, that will see Tasmania just scrape in with a budget surplus of $2 million in 3 years' time. It's Labor's core areas that will suffer the most: health, education and public sector jobs. But the Treasurer warns if she's not tough now, the state will return to the dark old days of the 1990s. Martin Carter here reports.
Just north of the city, pain is being felt in Hobart's industrial heartland. Economic malaise is gripping this state. Businesses lie dormant, awaiting the next wave of spending.
If we allow the government to slip back into debt, our key services and the support we provide for vulnerable Tasmanians would be jeopardised.
The global financial crisis took its time being felt in Tasmania, but now it lingers. The $4.8 billion budget handed down today is a reflection of the state's dire financial position. There's a $32 million deficit this financial year. That's expected to blow out to almost $115 million before being reined in. Treasury insists the government is not in crisis, but it will be if nothing is done. Cost-saving measures are being introduced right across government spending.
The real challenge now is both whether these savings targets can be met and also the critical question of whether they can be met while maintaining the quality of public services.
This budget is tough, but then again the government's been foreshadowing that for months. Every department is being asked to cut its costs, and the equivalent of 1,700 jobs has to go.
What is your main concern with this budget?
Well, my main concerns are about the fiscal strategy going forward and whether the numbers are going to match up.
Specifically, health is the biggest loser. The government is hoping to save $100 million next financial year, but the onus on making savings has largely been handballed to the department. The savings are expected to be made by shedding jobs and through other less specific measures like reducing the amount spent on locums, travel, conferences and payroll. Elsewhere, the state-owned power companies are being forced to hand over more of their profits. Hydro Tasmania will fork out an extra 20% in dividends and Aurora Energy 10%. Water bills will go up by 10% in the coming financial year, a doubling of the promised price hike. Public servants' wages account for almost half the budget, so they're firmly in the sights of Treasury. Along with shedding the equivalent of 1,700 jobs, those who stay in the sector will have to endure wage growth that's less than CPI.
We cannot continue to maintain a public service that is unsustainable.
We are going to run a campaign to oppose these cuts. We believe that they are unnecessary. The way this government has done this is fraudulent. They told a pack of lies before the last election.
Tourism doesn't escape either. A call centre in Launceston will be shut down and 24 jobs at Tourism Tasmania will be scrapped. There'll be 50 fewer police officers than the government promised, and the Department of Emergency Management is expected to save $8 million in the next financial year.
The government's saving strategy is very much a work in progress, I think. Certainly health and education have borne a fair bit of the burden. But we really don't know exactly which programs are going to be cut.
Richard Eccleston is an expert in government spending and spent this morning in the budget lockup. He believes the financials are sound, but a lot of the cutting measures are vague.
Is there a risk that some of these cuts could be counterproductive?
This is the real challenge for government. If the government just expects agencies to provide the same services with 5, 10 or 15% less staff and less financial resources, then there's a real risk that it will affect the efficiency of the state sector.
Education is also in the sights of the Razor Gang, and savings of almost $46 million need to be made in the coming financial year. The government has a hit list of 20 schools that will be assessed for closure. They're right across the state and mostly in regional communities, from Dover and Franklin in the south to Westbury and Avoca in the north. Stanley and Sprent are among the schools being targeted in the northwest. The closure program can mostly be attributed to the fact that 15 years ago there were about 6,000 more students in the state's public education system. Expecting cuts to education, 7:30 Tasmania contacted several schools in the lead up to the budget, including some on the hit list. Not one had any inkling that they were facing imminent closure.
We need to understand is that once populations start to move out of rural settlements, it's pulling against gravity to try and get them to return.
Tony McCall is an expert in regional development. He's predicting that without a school, families will drift away from small communities.
Schools are the canary in the mines for rural and regional communities, and as you say, Martin, I mean what we've got is 14 out of 20 of those schools in rural and regional areas. And what happens, of course, is that you take schools out of rural and regional areas and every other service funding follows.
I expect that there will be a number of people who are very concerned about some of these decisions, and particularly those school communities who will be worried about what their future means.
Another program encouraging schools to keep class sizes small has been axed. And that means there'll be more students in classrooms. The Tasmanian Education Performance Report has been culled, along with measures that compare the state's literacy and numeracy levels with those interstate. The Premier's expecting a hostile reception from unions and P&F groups.
We were shocked that there were a list of schools already identified. We've been assured that there wasn't a hit list.
New child and family centres are being mothballed and capital investment programs are also on hold. On the upside, there's a rebate on payroll tax for companies that create new jobs, and there's $6 million to reform the Planning Commission and implement consistent statewide policies. Business Tasmania is a new body that's effectively a one-stop shop for government licences, regulations and permits. Mining royalties will be increased, and there's almost $500 million to spend on infrastructure. But overall, it's the budget of 1,000 cuts. And even the money men aren't exempt. About 20 jobs in Treasury will go over the next 4 years.